I'm sure after Gurudev's introduction and book launch, there's no need for me to introduce Rajiv ji. Yeah. So we can straight away head to the talk. Yeah. So here's Rajiv ji. You can give a big round of applause.
So I'm delighted to be here to discuss my new book, The Battle for Sanskrit. This book, it's a 500-page book. It's a very analytical, academic book talking about our civilization, which has a huge, our civilization includes a lot of things, Sanskrit being the bedrock. And the book is framed as a discussion, debate between insiders and outsiders. Insiders would be people like you who practice meditation, people who do bhakti, people who do yajna, people who consider Sanskrit sacred, people who believe in the sacredness of the cosmos, people who believe that there is something higher, what is called Paramarthika, the transcendental realm, besides the Vyavarika, which is the material worldly realm. So those are insiders. The reason for this debate is because, unlike other civilizations, in the case of Indian civilization, the discourse is controlled by the outsiders. Now in the ashram it's controlled by insiders. Of course, you're very lucky. But only a minuscule percentage of the population are so immersed as insiders that they're connected. The media, the government bureaucrats, the school textbooks, academic professors, courses in humanities, these are not written from the insider perspective. Under the garb of secularism, what we have is a very Marxist, leftist, atheistic kind of intellectual regime. And if you look at where they get their knowledge from, it's a discipline in the West known as Indology, means the study of Indian civilization, started 200 plus years ago during the colonial era. And this Indology in that colonial era started creating all the knowledge about who we are, teaching us who we are. So we were taught based on the British idea or Western idea, European idea of who we are. And the traditional pathshalas and traditional authorities were sidelined. This is done as part of colonizing people. When the British left, we didn't get rid of this kind of intellectual dimension. We did not become intellectually liberated and free. So we are still intellectually colonized. And the colonial hub, the hub of Indology shifted across the Atlantic from Britain to United States. So the European Orientalism kind of faded, and there's been the rise of American Orientalism in its place. So I'm writing this book taking on some big shots. I only write books if I can start a fight. And the reason is that a goody-goody book can be ignored. I want to be non-ignorable, because when you're non-ignorable, then you start a debate, you start an argument. I want to do it with respect. I have a lot of respect for my opponents. I think they're very brilliant people. I just disagree with some of their premises, but I have no dislike for them. It's nothing personal. I want to be friends, but I want to have very strong disagreements also. So I write these kind of books where a huge change is needed. And this change will not happen in a goody-goody way. No incumbent in power just leaves on their own, especially if they've enjoyed it for so long. You have to kind of really take them on. And when you take them on, it's a kind of, they're going to come after you. So I know they're going to come after me. And I'm sort of expecting it, and that also draws them into the Kurukshetra. This is an intellectual Kurukshetra, battlefield. And so I'm also drawing them in by making these, by making a very sharp critique. There's not a single sentence of disrespect in this book. I keep on saying that these are brilliant people, but here are problems. So, if you look at who has adhikar or authority over the discourse of a civilization, you will find in the case of China, it's with the Chinese. They have all the journals in Mandarin, they have all the conferences, the prestigious places to study. In the case of Japan, it's Japanese studies, it's with Japan. Arabic studies, it's with the Arabs. Persian is with Iran, and so on. You know, if you want to be an expert in French studies, then, you know, France is the place to go and they have the authority. But Indian civilization is the only one studied from the outside mainly. The best places for any Indian to go get a PhD would be Harvard, Columbia, Chicago, Oxford kind of thing. And everybody wants to publish their papers in a foreign journal, and they beg to be invited to a foreign conference. So this means that we are sort of slaves to another point of view, even to be respected for our own civilizational studies. Yeah? This means that rather than being the producers of knowledge about our civilization, we become the consumers. We're consuming the knowledge somebody else produces about us. This is very strange. And we can export IT, we can export pharmaceuticals, we can export automobile technology and, you know, manufacturing, and we have this Make in India program. So why not make in India Indology? Why can't we be the world center of Indology? So I've coined the term Swadeshi Indology, and I'm contrasting Swadeshi Indology, which means indigenous, our view, with Videshi Indology, which is foreign view. So really this book is a battle between the Swadeshi and the Videshi views of Indian civilization. Now, the book started when the Videshi Indology centers in the Ivy League had reached an agreement, MOU or something like that, with the Shingeri Mutt to become the official representatives and set up Adi Shankara chairs in Ivy Leagues, controlled by people I'm criticizing as atheists, Nastika, people who are known writers and critics of the Vedic view, people who dismiss the Vedic Shruti and the Vedic sacredness, people who dismiss the sacredness in the Ramayana and see it as a political exploitation story. So why would, unless we have inferiority complex, why would we do such a thing? And so when I argued, I got attacked by people saying it's none of your business, you get out of the way. And this is our own wealthy Indians thinking they are doing a lot of good and prestige by setting up this chair for which they get accolades, which they put in millions of dollars, and they go get the blessings of some administrators in these traditional mattas. And this is what got me going. I figured I should get to the bottom of it. The one thing the investors could not answer is when I used the term due diligence. I said, have you done due diligence on these people you are investing in? And you as savvy investors have to do due diligence, and they all knew that term. And they hadn't done any due diligence. Foolishly, they showed me the press release, publicity material of the people they were investing in, and said, according to this, they're good people. And I said, you would never invest in an airline or in a hotel or in an IT company or, you know, using the public relations material of those people. You have to do independent due diligence, and they hadn't. The closest term to due diligence in the Sanskrit tradition is Purva Paksha. Purva Paksha means you study the other side. You study them analytically, logically, no emotions, in a balanced way, in order to understand your opponent, and then you do Uttar Paksh, your response. So Adi Shankara, in whose name they were going to build all these chairs, he is the champion of Purva Paksha. And he did Purva Paksha with the Buddhists, with the Purva Mimamsa, with various other schools of thought. And so what an insult to Adi Shankara that you discarded his own methodology and adopted some other, the methodologies of Marxism, postmodernism, new kind of fashionable theories. So I critiqued the most powerful scholars in Western Indology today who are defining Sanskrit studies, defining they're doing the translation. Murthy has given them millions of dollars to translate hundreds of volumes into English. So the question is, what's the lens, what's the standards, what's the interpretation with which they're doing it? and there's nobody who is really bothered to raise this issue. So it's sort of a one-man campaign, but it's working. Because in this tour, wherever I've gone, I've addressed traditional scholars. They appreciate my concern, they support me, they've offered help. Many Sanskrit universities have told me that they will assign their best scholars to work with me. So I want to train a home team of intellectual Kshatriyas, people who are grounded in our tradition, very solid Sanskrit and knowledge of texts. I will tell them what the opposing side is saying and ask them to give a response. So I will play the role of the opponent and have them debate me. This way we train them. So we're going to start this in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. We're going to start a project and bring in some bright people and get them going into this Purva Paksha of Western Indology. You cannot give a response unless you have understood them and studied them in the Purva Paksha first. So my book also analyzes why several hundred years ago we stopped the Purva Paksha tradition. I mean, when the early Christians came, there was no critique of them. When Islam came, there was no systematic critique. When colonialism came, when Marxism came, when post-colonial studies has come, there is no traditional Indian critique of these, which is required as per tradition. We are supposed to give a critique, our scholars are supposed to give a critique. And I scolded them and I said, I don't want to blame the opposing side for doing what they are doing, because it's natural for them to do what they are doing. I'm criticizing our traditional people for not giving a response, and they accepted it. It has to do with funding, it has to do with not knowing English, it has to do with a lot of reasons, and we're trying to fix that. Now, even before the book came out, 6 months before, I discussed it at the Thailand World Sanskrit Congress, and immediately the attack started. Immediately they sent petitions to my publishers, asking them not to publish it, to ban all my books, accusing me all sorts of things to prevent my freedom of speech. And these are the same people who champion the free speech. Of course, it depends on whose free speech they're championing. So I must tell you, a lot of people in Art of Living supported me in this campaign. We did a counter petition. The petition against me had 250 signatures by eminent scholars and Indologists and the petition for me, the counter petition for me, was common people, practitioners, traditional scholars, mathas, Art of Living people, and we had 11,000, so 40 to 1. 40 to 1. Yeah. So they've kind of run off, and then the fight started. Until the book got printed, they would be lobbying with the publisher to stop it. Once it went to the press, and they had to stop the press because of some issue that came up. I was brought back from a holiday in Florida, middle of the night, because the book printing had stopped. So I was very worried. So until it actually happened, I didn't know what's going to happen, what's going to happen. So the mere fact that this book is out itself means we won the first battle of Sanskrit. Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about what some of the issues are. The most important point of disagreement is over the sacredness of Sanskrit, Vedas, Puranas, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Yagna, Mantra. The opposing camp, the preeminent Western Indologists, deny the sacredness. So it's an atheistic view. It's a view that says this claim of sacredness is to exploit. It's a primitive view. It's backward. It's irrational. All the things that atheists would say. And it's fine for people to say that. There are people who say that of Christianity, of every religion. What is not fine is to give them the adhikar and the control to run the show. It's okay for them to say that, but it's our people who are from within the tradition that ought to control it. So it's establishments like this we are in that ought to be the centers of Indology. So one of the reasons I'm here is I want to convince Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, I want to convince major Hindu organizations and traditional centers of learning that we have to come together and create Swadeshi Indology University here in India and train our people to become the leaders in this kind of an intellectual battle and not be consumers of what somebody else is writing. This is an important goal I have. So the Vedas talk of Paramarthika, which is the transcendental realm, and Vyavaharika, which is this worldly realm, and these two are integrated. You can't remove one or the other. The school of thought I am critiquing have come up with the conclusion that the Paramarthika realm is full of abuses and it is irrational, it's unscientific, you can't prove it. And the voice, the authority they rely on is a 17th century Italian named Vico. Now, when I ask our traditionalists to give a response, they never heard of Vico. So they said, we'll have to spend a long time studying who's this Vico. We have to read his books and translate them and understand them, and then we can respond. So the idiom, the style of language in which we are being studied by the West is such that our own traditional scholars don't have access to it. So it's unfair. It's like somebody talking about you in a way that you don't even know what they're saying. So this is how bad the situation has become. The top three thinkers whose theories are being cited by the group I'm critiquing are Vico, Benjamin, Gramsci. None of our people heard of them. Yeah, they say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. So either they'll ignore, our people will either ignore or insult or be bombastic or acquiesce and give in and join the other side. None of those are acceptable to me. I want a calm, cool-headed, analytical, rational response. Take them seriously and give a response, point by point, and treat them with respect. So, in the past, there used to be a school of atheists called Charvakas. How many of you have heard of Charvakas? Okay, I'm very happy. Then you've got a nice audience here. Charvakas are people who dismiss the Vedas, dismiss the sacred, and that's similar to these guys. So I call them the return of the Charvakas. The Charvakas are back. The left is Charvakas. Okay. The atheists are Charvakas. They are Charvakas 2.0. And the reason is they're more sophisticated than the 1.0 Charvakas. Because they got a global access. They are globalized power. They have a lot of money. They have institutional clout. Politically well positioned. Very articulate, sophisticated, and so on. And they can cite that 500 years of atheistic science has produced so much results. That is true. I mean, cell phone and microphone and airplane and computers and automobiles, none of them rely on anything sacred. The non-sacred science, the secular science, produce all these benefits. So they can, unlike the Charvaka 1.0 who had nothing to show off, these guys have a lot of technology. So they're very sophisticated and in arguing against the sacredness. And so we cannot dismiss them. But we have a very strong case, we just need to articulate it. And this is what I'm trying to get our own scholars up to speed so we can respond. Not only do they remove the sacred, they add in its place social oppression inherent in the Indian texts as their claim that this is basically social oppression, and political domination as the reason and motive and agenda for these texts. So in other words, they're insinuating there's nothing sacred, it's all hocus pocus, whatever they're saying. All this has been going on for thousands of years to exploit people. And for the king to become powerful, for the Brahmins to claim superiority and to be hegemonic and oppressive against various other people. So the byline of the book, that in the front cover, underneath the Battle for Sanskrit, it says, is Sanskrit political or sacred? They would say it's political, I would say it's sacred. Oppressive or liberating? They would say it's oppressive, I would say it's liberating. Dead or alive? They say it's dead and I say it's alive. Now, this business of alive, Sanskrit is not just a language, it's also Sanskriti, a way of life, dance, music, architecture, yagna, philosophy, mantra. So Sanskrit permeates all these things and it lives through these things. It's like the architecture out of which come all these manifestations of that same architecture. So I am perfectly entitled to saying that as long as all these things are alive, Sanskrit is alive, because it is the foundation and basis on which all these other things thrive. So I feel Sanskrit and Sanskriti are very much alive. I don't like the term classical language, because classical language refers to Greek and Latin, which are dead languages, killed by the Christians. Those civilizations civilizations were killed by Christianity, and they are now sitting in a museum, and they are praised and respected as sort of, this is what it used to be, but they're dead, and we can sort of give them a little bit of honor. Those are not living civilizations. I prefer the model of Mandarin studies, which is ancient but also living, and they don't call it classical. Persian, which is ancient and living. Arabic, which is ancient and living, and so on. So I prefer that Sanskrit methodology, Sanskrit and Sanskriti studies methodology should not follow the Western pattern of classical languages, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Those classical languages are dead, and I just don't think we should engage in that. Now, a very major difference is between their views and my views is that they consider the oral tradition to be not relevant, not important, not able to innovate. They're saying that history starts with writing, and so everything that happened in the oral era is not history. I mean, those things are just discarded. But while that may be true of the West, it's not true of Indian civilization. Look at the beautiful music being played. There are no written scores. You can't say music hasn't evolved and innovated just because it's not a written system. West, it's written scores. You play from written scores. Our greatest musicians don't use written scores. So it's an oral tradition. Yoga is an oral tradition. The yogi doesn't have to read anything. The meditation is an oral tradition. You do not need to read a book on meditation to be a greatest meditator. You see, cuisine, the great chefs in India don't read a recipe book like, so many grams of this and for so many minutes put this in 30 degrees and all that. They don't follow a recipe. They're not mechanical. It's improvised. It's from within. So all dimensions of our Sanskriti are deeply oral and embodied. It's the body that transmits from guru to shishya. So dismissing the oral tradition is a very big violence as far as I'm concerned. I would never accept that. Now, then the theory comes, the death of Sanskrit, that Sanskrit died 1,000 years ago, and it was killed by Hindu kings, and Muslims tried to actually save it, but the Hindu kings would not cooperate. This is a theory, because it's very politically correct kind of people. Okay, and then Ramayana, the theory on Ramayana is that until 1,000 years ago, when the Turks invaded India, prior to that, Ramayana was not a big deal in the Indian public. There was really not a big Ram Bhakti going on. And when the Turks invaded, the Hindu kings need something to unite the public against them, and they needed a narrative to make them look like demons and make themselves look like divine. So Ramayana was suddenly popularized and mobilized as a political weapon for the kings to appear divine and to project Ravana and Rakshasa and evil demonic ideas onto the Muslims. So this theory has been built, and the people who theorize this say that this, for the last 1,000 years, Ramayana has been, to paraphrase it by words, a weapon of mass destruction. Because whenever there is a need to go kill Muslims and do violence, they invoke Ramayana because it has this kind of a story built into it. And therefore they interpret that the contemporary Hindu-Muslim issues that go on are all because Ramayana is meant for that. Very interesting, very interesting. They also say that there is a theory called deep Orientalism, according to which the European exploitation of others, which is the intellectual part of it, is called Orientalism, the study of others as inferior, in a romantic, patronizing way. They are saying that these ideas the Europeans got from the study of Sanskrit. That Sanskrit had in it ideas on how you discriminate, how you oppress, how you suppress. And so Sanskrit oppressiveness The texts of Sanskrit had built-in oppressiveness. When Westerners came and studied Sanskrit, they got these ideas and they became racists. In fact, it goes on to say that the German Nazism, Holocaust, has something to do with their study of Sanskrit, because these ideas of violence on a large scale were already contained in Sanskrit. And so they accuse Sanskrit, insinuate Sanskrit as a sort of cause of these kind of problems. Now, every insider would have a problem with this. It is a tragedy that these things have gone on for the last few decades. It is not their fault. They are entitled to it, freedom of speech. They are entitled to writing all these things. It is a tragedy that our people have never understood it, never responded to it, and we are glorifying them. We are giving them Padam Shri and Padam Bhushan and giving them millions of dollars of awards and inviting them to take over the intellectual discourse of our most important peetams and matthas, and some ill-informed NRIs are out there raising millions of dollars to fund chairs. There are some organizations doing that. So this is the problem I have. I want not only the insiders, the home team, to refute all this. I want us to study our Shastras as repositories of knowledge, repositories of science. Now, while we are being denigrated on the one hand, on the other hand, there is a huge grand theft of Shastra and intellectual property quietly being siphoned off and repackaged into Western frameworks. For instance, cognitive science, neuroscience, the cutting edge they do is based on the study of Buddhist meditators and Hindu yogis, and new theories are coming on the state of minds and all the consciousness studies, where they don't acknowledge the Hindu or Buddhist origins. They sort of secularize it and turn it into a new science that they claim. So for instance, Yoga Nidra has become lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming. It's a very big industry. And Vipassana is mindfulness. So I'm writing a book called The Mindfulness Industry. It is the industrialization of meditation. Kind of industrialization. And decoupling it from its source traditions. And yoga first got decoupled from the Vedic traditions, and it decontextualized, and now it's being recontextualized into Christian yoga. So this is a lot. So there's a lot to do if we could put together a team of insiders taking on this discourse. So I'm one of the theories I'm very impressed by, because I'm actually very impressed by the scholarship, by the hard work, the rigor of these people. One of the most impressive theories that they have developed, which I explained in my book in detail, and our traditional people never heard of such a thing even, and it's about us, It's called the aestheticization of power. Aestheticization of power. Okay, I'll explain to you what it means. It means it's not like brute force power, which is very visible power, but this is power through, in a very aesthetic way, poetry, drama, where power is being imposed on you in such a nice, elegant way that you don't even know that power is being imposed on you. So it's like somebody who kind of exploiting you, but also very respectful, very polite, and the aesthetics with which they are behaving is so nice that you are mesmerized. You are very impressed by the diplomacy of the whole thing. Now, this theory of the aestheticization of power started in the Nazi era. Marxists did not know why the proletariat did not uprise in a communist revolution to overthrow the ruling elite. They had done that in Russia. In Russia, Lenin had made a communist revolution because the economy was bad, there was unemployment, people were poor and hungry, so he convinced them to rise up and overthrow, and there was a communist revolution. Germany had similar economic depression, but there was no communist revolution, and they were wondering why. And how did the Nazis come? The Nazis, so rather than overthrowing the elite, a new elite replaced the old elite. So in Nazism, a new kind of elite came and replaced the old elite. The Marxists had to explain why is this so. Traditional Marxism was unable to explain such a thing happening. So this theory of aestheticization of power was developed by Benjamin and others, and this is called the Frankfurt School of Marxism. This is a theory. Now the theory is that Nazis were successful because they aestheticized their power with parades, national songs, lot of drama, theater. They funded art about the greatness of the Third Reich. So they made people feel patriotic. So by giving people a sense of, like India shining, that kind of a thing, by giving people a sense of big, we're doing so well, people forgot their hunger, people forgot their economic plight, and people just went for the aesthetics with which this narrative was being presented. So narrative presented through poetry, art, music, drama, parades, you know, all these symbols of greatness, we are doing so well. North Korea does that, by the way, now. They do that. So this is a very brilliant theory. The aestheticization of power is a way you can keep people under your spell, even if they're very poor and doing very poorly, okay, by using aesthetic methods. This aestheticization of power was designed for one purpose. But then Indologists wanted a theory to explain how did Sanskrit spread across South Asia and Southeast Asia for 1,000 years without military conquest. How did it happen? So they started using this theory of the aestheticization of power and said Sanskrit spread because the king could use kavya, poetry, to aestheticize his greatness, his grandeur, all these pageantry of performing Ramayana, all kinds of performances of symbol jagnas, was basically to dominate over you, to make the person performing seem grandiose, divine, powerful. So all this is to hypnotize the public. According to which, when you go for a yagna, those guys are trying to basically push you down, and you have to look up to them. They are the big shots. That is the message being given. And the portrayal of the king and all that in Ramayana and so on is designed to kind of keep the proletariat, keep the public happy and contented in their own low level, at a lower level of position. So what it amounts to is that the Brahmins and the kings had a conspiracy to exploit other people, and this is why Sanskrit spread. Sanskrit was a tool, a development tool, like you have, you know, Microsoft has development tools, and if you use the development tools, you can build a lot of apps. So Sanskrit was a development tool, so that, and the Brahmins developed this tool and franchised it, licensed it to the kings, and they could use it to build apps, and then these apps would give awe and power to the ruling elite. So the theory of the aestheticization of power is a theory that gives a certain political motive to Sanskrit and Sanskrit texts and Sanskriti, and removes the sacredness as a purpose. Its reason for spreading had nothing to do with sacredness. I claim that it spread because it brought sacred meaning to people's lives. The reason people adopted Yagna, and the people, they adopted Jyotish, and they adopted Ram Bhakti and Ram Leela and all these things, is because it brought meaning to their lives. It's not some kind of exploitation going on. So the insider view and outsider view, I'm making it very sharp. I'm making it sharp, and I'm inviting a debate. Now this cannot be done by me alone. Obviously I'm outnumbered and outfunded, and also those guys are very brilliant. I accept that. They know, they've studied this field a lot longer than I have. So I'm looking for, in this tour, I'm looking for allies. I'm looking for traditional scholars, and I'm finding allies. They're very happy that somebody's speaking up, somebody's saying what's in their heart, but they're not able to articulate it. So it'll take me about a year to create a home team of traditional Sanskrit scholars. I expect 3 kinds of teams, 3 levels, A, B and C, just to give some names. A are people who are from Sanskrit universities, they are traditional Sanskrit people, they don't know English, they don't understand these opponents, I have to do that for them, and then this book is a starting point, and then they can give more responses. That's the A part. B are English speaking westernized public intellectuals, the people who go to these literary festivals, who are supposed to be the smart guys in the media, people who are writing books and so on. So a lot of us are English speaking type people. So how to make them join my home team? They are not the ones who are necessarily going to do the heavy lifting in terms of Sanskrit responses, but they have a large role to play in packaging our response, making it user friendly, and marketing it. So that's kind of B level of. I need a large number of those people on my side. And C are the social media. They can go, do all kind of stuff on social media. They're not writers either in Sanskrit nor in English. They're not writing at all. Their vocabulary, their writing skill is 140 characters, but they're useful, and they are really not intellectual Kshatriyas. They're more like emotional Kshatriyas. They're more like emotional kind of stuff. We have to channel it. We have to keep it contained and disciplined. We don't want to get it out of hand and say make rowdy, rabble rousing. We don't want that. But we want them to be able to express a voice. So that's my plan, and I would like to take questions now. And thank you very much for listening.
My name is Ram. Actually, I see these particular 3 teams, and there is, I think, one more team that probably is much more effective, who would be in a manner, for example, say in a social media, say they come between B and C, who would be able to create say apps, or for that matter content, which can be posted to make sure that there is a intellectual response which is going to all these particular people who are making these particular arguments. So I think they have a, so they would be a, the term that you coined, they would be aesthetically much more appealing for a lot of audience in the world.
I consider that to be B. Part of B. One part of B is, but B includes documentaries. B includes comic books. B includes animation. It includes all the multimedia. It's basically mainstream communication. So, and these lines are blurred also, they're not that hard for us. So, the real thing is, if somebody wants to help me, they should start helping me. I mean, we can build a very sophisticated classification system and do nothing.
Okay.
But more important is do something for me, and we can figure out where it fits.
Okay.
And we can create a new category for you, but do something that I can use. Yeah, thank you.
And there is one more question. So if we had this particular, so probably the Prasthanatraya, out of which Brahma Sutram is basically was a response to the Charvaks and all those particular atheists. So now, how exactly this particular, every time Hinduism has refined itself and created a better understanding of the opponent, and then gave a response, much more much more prepared response. So now, how exactly this particular entire entire preparation of a civilization went into dustbin? So
yeah. So I understand. If you read this, I have answered. I have a whole section on the death of Purva Paksha,
okay,
which I explain how it died, why it died, what is there in our character. So it's better you read it because it's a long answer. Today we have to do this rebuttal of Charvak 2.0 all over again. The old rebuttal won't work because these guys have obviously evolved. They have new ideas. Today's Charvak is far more dangerous, intellectually far superior. He's not repeating those arguments. Today's Charvak is not repeating the old arguments. They have come up with many new arguments. It's we who have been sleeping while they're growing and evolving. We just haven't been keeping up with them. This book, actually, they're quite, the people I've critiqued told me, there's no other book, nobody else has taken an insider perspective and given such a detailed, thorough response to them. So this is my response to the Charvaks. Okay. And this has to continue. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm so happy to meet you. I read your book in 2012. And before reading your book, I was considered secular among my secular friends. And after that, I'm considered communal among my secular friends. So I made a lot of enemies on Facebook just because I am, I'm a supporter of our culture. And when I get into a conversation with a few of my friends, and they say, what is the use of Sanskrit? I can't use it to get a job. There's no point in teaching it to my children. I mean, at least if I learn C# or .NET, I get a job. But what can I do with Sanskrit?
Okay, so Sanskrit texts, the Shastras, are being mined for practical applications, not necessarily by us. Some of the successful examples where we are doing it is Ayurveda. It has commercial applications. Ayurveda is a major economy in medicine and health. All over the world, people are accepting this plant-based medicine and stuff like that, and a whole new model of the human physiology. And this is based on Sanskrit texts. So that's an area. Sanskrit has a lot to offer in mathematics. New mathematics being developed. There's this guy, Manjul Bhargava, who's one of the preeminent mathematicians in the world. He talks about how his ideas are based on Sanskrit-based mathematical texts of several hundred years ago. So there is more data mining and understanding the logic and the methodology which we can use today. A major area is cognitive science. I think the area that is very close to Sri C's work is how higher states of consciousness, how meditation, Shiv Sutras in particular, Shiv Sutras and various tantras are being used in many modern ways in terms of, for instance, mental health. A lot of mental health treatment methods are actually Hindu Buddhist based. And these people have studied these texts and taken the stuff, repackaged it. So we have reduced Sanskrit to a language. That's the problem. Sanskrit is not just a language. It should be taught in the philosophy department, psychology department, medicine department. It should be taught in mathematics department. So it's a way of thinking. It's a framework. It's an architecture in which new creative ideas can come. And so to make Sanskrit commercially important, in terms of professionally important, new innovations are kind of a basis for new innovations. We have to take it out of this ghetto, is place that, the guy who learns Sanskrit just talk and he can order tea and turn on the lights, he can say things like that, and it impresses people. We have to take it into the development of R&D based on Sanskrit. So that's a challenge we have to do. Otherwise, other people are doing it anyway. Sanskrit is the heart of computational linguistics. How many of you here know anything about computation? Okay, so it's one bunch of people. Panini's grammar is at the heart of computational linguistics, which is in the cutting edge of computer science. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to...
Namaskar. It has been a pleasure to meet you. And, whatever you said was like food for a soul. I just wanted to ask you a question. That shouldn't we also be, focusing more on children? Like the indoctrination which has happened from the West over the years started with the child, when he was still young.
Yes.
So how do we plan to go about it?
Yeah, we were raised on this Baba, black sheep and this kind of stuff, which doesn't make any sense. Just completely alienated. And we have amazing stories, we have amazing chants, and, I think that in the unconscious mind, Sanskrit, its vibrations will, if you put them, even when the child is in the womb, you put those, and when the child is young and the child is growing up, and the stories you tell, it has an effect on that child later in life.
Yes, it does.
So we have to do all that. We have to introduce that. Now it is up to parents to lobby in the school system and ask them to change.
No, I just wanted to add something more. Just yesterday I saw probably a lady from Southeast Asia somewhere, and probably a Japanese, and the child was playing on that tab with a Japanese cartoon. So the culture today has got more associated with the applications and the cartoons and whatever appeals to children. So I believe, shouldn't we be doing something?
Yes, I think we should be developing multimedia. We should be developing, using all the technology to bring education, excite and challenge all the senses. If you think about it, I have written an argument here that the writing is not superior to oral. I have written an argument in this book. Okay, most of the human history of evolution was not writing, but knowledge was accumulating.
Yes.
So your senses, your eyes, are parallel processing. They're not linear processing like writing. Parallel, when you see this room, you're seeing a lot of things. When you go in a forest, you're seeing a lot of things simultaneously. Yeah? You're not looking at it linearly, sequentially. And when you are experiencing a forest, you are experiencing it with your ears, with your nose, with your touch, all the senses simultaneously. It's a multi-sensory or multimedia processing cognition that human beings and animals have. Writing is very artificial because you don't use smell, you don't use hearing, you don't use your touch, you don't use anything, and even the sight is monochrome and one directional. It's at point some percent of the total cognitive apparatus that gets used. The 99 point some part of your cognitive apparatus is atrophying, is just being setting aside. So people say that literacy makes you advanced. I think it makes you one-dimensionally better off. It is necessary, but it should not be at the expense of the other senses being used for education. So the education system we've had, which had music and drama and storytelling, mathematics. In my grandfather's school, he's a math teacher in village, the mathematics tables were taught singing. They would say 3 times 4 is 12, like that. There was certain intonation. That's how Vedic style is a musical. Now they found out there's this guy called Georgy Lozanov, who died now. He developed something called accelerated learning. And accelerated learning is a rave in the West. Now they're sending their kids to accelerated learning schools. If you dig up the history of accelerated learning, it started with this man called Lozanov. He is the founding father of this whole theory of accelerated learning. And he said you should give the child left brain, right brain, multiple kinds of stimuli, not just one-dimensional. And the encoding in the neurosystem is better that way. So, and he got it from India, because in the 1950s, the Russians sent people to India to see if there were some psychic powers the yogis had which might have military applications. CIA also studied, by the way, Patanjali Yoga Sutra, and there was a huge project because they wanted to know, can you float and can you do distance vision, can you tell where the enemy's missiles are, maybe some yogis can be trained. So they were, both CIA and the Soviets had, for some time they were studying these things. Now this man Georgy Lozanov was a neuroscientist sent to India. He came back and said, I found one thing which is extraordinary human capability that they have, and that's memory. And they can memorize 100,000 verses and keep chanting it by heart, and they do it correctly. And he, as a neuroscientist, he didn't know how it's even possible, because there's no neuroscientific explanation of how somebody could learn so much memorization. So he wanted to know how they memorize so much. And he says, one thing that is interesting, they're using both brains. They're chanting, there's an intonation with which the verse is memorized. And there's a very carefully designed intonation. So in his book, he records and he comes up with all these styles of intonation that they're using in chanting, and which one is optimum and how it helps. So based on that, he developed a theory of accelerated learning. And he says that if you learn through multiple senses, you will learn faster and you will learn better. Now this is an example of Sanskrit feeding accelerated learning in the West, enhancing their ability to learn, and then someday some of those missionaries will set up an accelerated learning school here, and you will say this is an American gift to us.
Yeah, to sum it up, when we'll remember you, we'll not just remember you by your book, but by this interaction we had.
Thank you so much. But please do read this. This is very important. I want every one of you to get a copy of this. It means a lot to me. You should, whatever extent you can read. I'll tell you something. If you read the introduction, that is the whole Shingeri drama, what happened and how I stopped it and what not, and then you jump over to the conclusion, which tells you what's the way forward, what do we have to do. Okay, that itself is going to give you a huge idea. Then the chapters in between are such that you can pick and choose in any sequence what you want. So how they're distorting Ramayana is one thing. How they are removing the sacredness is another thing. How they're insinuating political agendas is another chapter. So you could read them, one by one. And whatever you read, each one of those will be like a whole doctrine, whole thesis that you will learn. So I would really like you to do that. Yeah.
Hello, sir. I have 4 questions, and the first is authentication of power was used by Britishers ruling India as a name of black men burdens, and they have to train us in their ways. Is it so?
Aestheticization of power.
Yeah.
Well, the British aestheticization of power would be more like, giving this king the gun salute, so everybody is very, very impressed. It's more like drama, aesthetics. Aesthetic is like beauty, using ideas of beauty and pageantry, to show themselves to be very powerful. And the British are good at that. They're good at, kind of pomp and glory. And our people went for that. Mughals were good at that also, aestheticizing their power.
And the other question is, what we said that Ramayana was used to unify us. The same was used by Babur in the back years, using with the cannons, and he used the word jihad for the first time to mobilize Muslims to invade India.
Okay, you made an interesting point. The opponents of mine effectively are saying that Ramayana is a jihad call. That's effectively what I think you put it in a different way. They're not saying it like that.
It is.
But their allegation amounts to saying that Ramayana is primarily a jihadi doctrine. That's really what it amounts to. I'm very glad you said that. I'm going to use that in my talks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, sir, Sanskrit was a very powerful language and we use it. Then why we moved to the other language like Pali? I mean, that was not conventional, I mean, not highly used by the lower caste people. That's why we moved to some alternate language.
No, we didn't move from Sanskrit to Pali. I mean, there is a whole 2-3 chapters on the history of languages.
Okay.
You should read that. And I'm explaining the opponent's view on the history of languages and what I think is wrong with it and what is my theory of languages. They start with this Aryans brought Sanskrit and the other languages were native and there was a clash between them and Sanskrit is hegemonic and dominating the native languages, and I don't buy that. I think that these languages have coexisted, given each other back and forth a lot. Sanskrit is formal and the others are informal, and you have formal and informal needs. Both are needed. Informal is more creative. You can improvise, you can experiment, certain ideas go viral. Yeah, and certain new language twists and words, they go viral. Like songs go viral, jokes go viral, words also can. New word comes up and it goes viral, it's accepted now. Some new innovations don't get accepted. So the experimentation, playfulness, you can have informality more in the vernaculars. And some of these things, when they become very established, Sanskrit borrows them and gives them formal structure. And so Sanskrit is formal, has a formal structure. The other languages at that period in time didn't have that same structured grammar. So they played a formal, informal, hyphenated kind of a role with each other. And so in any society, the elite literary people have a lot of sophisticated language. It's nothing to do with prejudice or anything. Yeah, today, I mean, you look at the Western Indologists, they write in a very sophisticated English. And you could say they're like a caste system almost, because they have a privilege, access to knowledge, a power, and this is determined by their use of English idiom and theories and structures which the common person speaking English doesn't understand. So the sophisticated use of language is not something limited to Sanskrit and limited to just our culture.
And so fourth one is, we are, by this book, you are against that Charvakas only, or we are going to other orthodox system of Jainism or Buddhism also?
No, I have no problem with Jainism, Buddhism. Okay. No problem with them. I am looking at all the dharmic systems versus, I'm not the old Charvaks, okay, but the current Charvaks, which is Western trained Indians. This is all Western trained Indians. All the guys who write for the Hindu newspaper, which should be called the anti-Hindu. It should be called the anti-Hindu actually. These kind of people, and all these guys who are talking about tolerance and intolerance, they're the most close-minded people, the most intolerant people. None of them have the courage to invite me and have an honest, serious, face-to-face debate. Behind my back, when I'm gone to USA, they will write all these articles behind my back. So they're scared, they're cowards. So I'm talking about this kind of a group of people. It's nothing about Jains and Buddhists. But I think there's a fashionable left-wing, Marxist, atheistic, postmodernist trend, and it is very anti-Vedic, anti-Hindu, anti-meditation and yagna and all that mantra. They're against all this stuff. It's those kind of, that's the battle I'm talking about. Thank you so much. Good questions.
Thank you.
नमस्कार सर, मेरा नाम आनंद है और आज बहुत समय से मैं कुछ ढूंढ रहा था, लगता है शायद मिल गया है, ढूंढ रहा था। अब ऐसा है कि इस पूरे ये एक तरह की क्रांति है जो चाहिए। अब हम बहुत सारे लोगों को मैं जानता हूँ, बहुत सारे लोगों को मैं जानता हूँ जो चाहते हैं इस तरह का चेंज। अब यहाँ एक थोड़ा सा डाउट ये है कि पहले तो मैं ये नहीं समझ पा रहा हूँ कि हम संस्कृति का पुनरुत्थान चाहते हैं या संस्कृत का।
दोनों
दोनों
दोनों, क्योंकि संस्कृत और संस्कृति दे आर इंटरट्वाइंड।
ठीक है जी।
संस्कृत इज द आर्किटेक्चर फॉर संस्कृति,
ठीक है।
और संस्कृत, एज लॉन्ग एज संस्कृति इज अलाइव,
Yes.
people will want to go back to Sanskrit.
बिल्कुल
The
ठीक है।
person who's dancer loves hearing Natya Shastra.
हाँ जी।
And the person who's doing yagna, even though he doesn't, even though it's only a few mantras, but the Sanskrit sounds very nice to him.
बचपन की एक छोटी सी बात यहाँ शेयर करना चाहूँगा। बेसिकली कि संस्कृत श्लोकोच्चारण हम लोग करते थे, कंपटीशन होते थे, पर संस्कृत नहीं सीख पाए। माँ बाप संस्कृत सिखाना चाहते थे, पर साथ साथ फिर जॉब का था, जैसे अभी एक भैया ने यहाँ बोला।
Nowadays, Sanskrit Bharati has made it easier.
हाँ जी।
हमारे को भी संस्कृत जैसे सिखाई गई थी, तो you hated it, you know.
Yes.
It was taught, so you hate it.
या नंबर लेके आने के लिए,
हाँ।
या जैसे बहुत स्कोरिंग थी।
So I'll tell you what happened. Sanskrit Bharati has written on why the teaching of Sanskrit was distorted. The British took over Sanskrit, and they only wanted to translate from Sanskrit to English. They did not want to have Sanskrit as a living spoken language. So the first thing to learn in their system is grammar. So when you learn grammar, then you can do the translation and so on. The real learning, this is a very important point. How you learn a language is through your mother. Mother doesn't start by teaching grammar. Okay, you just pick up and experiment, and it's playful, and you make mistakes, and you keep trying, and you figure out by osmosis and by patterns, and you become better and better at language. Only at a much later age you learn grammar, but you already learned the language without the grammar. This is how traditionally Sanskrit was taught. So Sanskrit Bharati teaches like that. They make drama, fun, music, jokes. So you can be making mistakes, doesn't matter. They're not concerned about whether you're correct and all. They just want you to enjoy, just like a child. And so it's not the grammar method, it's the immersion method. Yeah. Now, when I was taught Sanskrit, you too in schools, जो system रहा है, because you're following a British system. So उसमें they teach grammar, and you start hating it. Because you know it's sort of like if a mother were to say that this child is not going to learn a language until I first teach him grammar. I mean, you're never going to learn anything.
बिल्कुल ठीक है।
So this has to change.
हाँ जी। दूसरा क्वेश्चन मेरा ये है कि जो मैं राजीव दीक्षित जी के साथ भी जुड़ा हुआ था, उस संस्था के साथ जुड़ा हुआ था, पतंजलि के बारे में हम बात करते हैं, और जो बहुत सारे लोग अपने अपने लेवल पे बहुत कुछ कर रहे हैं, एक पर्टिकुलर मॉडल कोई इवॉल्व नहीं हो पाता। अब मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ, जो मेरा कंट्रीब्यूशन है, मैं फेसबुक के थ्रू, ट्विटर के थ्रू, बातचीत के थ्रू, कि हमारी संस्कृति में ये चीज़ें अच्छी थी, ये विजडम थी, मैं विजडम की बात करता हूँ कि आज तुम गाड़ी किसी भी उसके ब्रांड की लेते हो, जीन्स किसी भी ब्रांड की उठाते हो, ये मेड इन इंडिया की हम बात करते हैं, बहुत सारी चीज़ें एक जब इकट्ठी होकर के बातचीत होती है तो वो पोलिटिसाइज हो जाता है। नहीं, तुम एक विचारधारा को फॉलो करते हो जो कि पॉलिटिकल है, तुम इसके अगेंस्ट, तुम आज जो इंडिया इवॉल्व करना चाहते हो, तुम उसको वापस लेकर के जाना चाहते हो, जहाँ ये
so this idea कि praising and practicing Vedic tradition will take you backward, ये idea है, but we have to fight it. I'm arguing in this book that I'm arguing against, I'm explaining with respect their argument कि these things are backward, primitive, they're not creative, and I'm arguing that is not true. In fact, lot of research shows the effects of yoga to creativity and to better marks and to better accomplishments. A lot of the effects of yagna, the effects of meditation, the effects of Vedic tradition are positive. More and more people are doing this research. We are the ones not doing it, others are doing it, and they're going to take this stuff over and remove the Vedic references and call it something different. So we are lacking behind in the research on our civilization. And my job in this book is to get our traditional people upgraded so they can take this job.
So, तीसरा क्वेश्चन मेरा है कि इसको हम रीपैकेज, या आज जो दिखता है वो बिकता है, लोग उसको अपनाते हैं, या उस जो चीज़ बहुत सारे लोग फॉलो कर रहे होंगे, तब मैं पहले देखूंगा कि हाँ भेड़ चाल भी बहुत है।
ब्रांड वैल्यू।
अब इसकी ब्रांड वैल्यू हम किस लेवल पे बना है कि आज जो लोग हैं उसको अपनाएं और उसको यूज करें अपने रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी.
हाँ, ये it's people like us who have to wear this, wear it with pride. Yeah, wear it with pride. And it should not be seen as something जो गरीब लोग करते हैं, जो village वाले लोग करते हैं. It should not be seen like that. So this is where government can do more. Government can do more by funding these kind of things. Government can do more by funding, upgrading the standard of traditional Sanskrit scholars and giving more respect, more funds and resources. I have so many projects, but the limitation is funding. और हमारे लोग हैं जिनमें फंडिंग है, they would rather fund to some US Ivy League because उसमें उनको प्रेस्टीज मिलेगा, आदर मिलेगा, उनको कॉन्टैक्ट्स मिलेंगे, उनका नेटवर्क बढ़ेगा, बिजनेस मिलेगा उनको. They are more interested in that. So even our government and even our private funding people they need to be educated about it. So my book is to start a challenge and to get people like you to use this to kind of make some noise.
There are people.
Yes, and this book will make noise. It's already making noise. Yes.
A very good evening to this August gathering. Thank you, sir, for sharing those exciting ideas. I did study Sanskrit in my school because I was fascinated how the Germans were experimenting with Sanskrit as a language, perfect language for computers. So that's how I got on to study Sanskrit, and I have a deep fascination. I have 3 concerns regarding your presentation and what you've told us as of now. Firstly, the approximation of Indian culture to Sanskrit alone, I find it slightly problematic because as in your previous discourse you've just discussed that Indian culture was wider than the Sanskrit because there were people speaking Pali, Prakrit. Yes. So we have the Ashokan pillars written in those languages as well.
Right. So this is where I made clear that the title is The Battle for Sanskrit, but it is actually Sanskriti. So I'm describing Sanskriti, which Sanskriti means culture, civilization.
But then how can you equate it? Because not everybody, like now what do you talk about people in the northeast? They are also part of India, and that is not the Indian culture alone. Like Sanskrit is not the culture there. So how are you?
No, wait a second. Are you saying their language is not Sanskrit, which is not an issue with me at all? Or are you saying that their culture is not Indian culture? The second one, you have to become very clear.
I'm clear. I'm saying Indian culture is not equal to Sanskrit. Indian culture is a wider sphere in which Sanskrit forms a part.
Yeah. So it depends on what you define Sanskrit as a language is not my definition of Sanskrit. Since there are certain structures in Sanskrit, certain architectures, certain ways of dance, certain ways of just way of life, which you will find in no matter what the language is, that kind of Sanskriti is being practiced. In Northeast, it is being practiced. You look at some ancient sites, you will see Hindu goddesses, deities there. It is a modern thing that they don't exist, but goddess is there in almost every part of India.
That is a part of pagan culture that we...
No, that pagan is a Christian term. Pagan means village bumpkin. It's an abusive term. It is. It's like nigger. So when the Christians took over the pre-Christian polytheistic cultures, they called them pagan as an insult. Means we are cosmopolitan, sophisticated. Aap log gawar hai, you are village bumpkins. So you call anybody pagan, I don't like it. I don't even like the term tribal. Okay, I don't like that. There is no tribal. Tribals are those who they are jatis. We have jatis and varna. We don't have caste. And those who could not be put under the British scheme, who were outside the British scheme, they could not tabulate them, control them. Outskirts of the British scheme became tribals. So they are the uncivilized. So that's also an insulting word. So your vocabulary has to change. You are probably, I can see, you're probably a product of modern social sciences. Are you studying social sciences?
No, I've studied law.
Okay.
Yes, I'm doing a PhD in international law.
International law, okay. So the categories you're using of pagan and stuff like that, you need to rethink the very basis in which you are doing your argument.
Okay. Anyways, getting on to the next issue that I have.
No. But let's agree to disagree. Let's see where we're agreeing to disagree, because it's nothing wrong with disagreeing. We should continue the conversation. So I don't want to impose any idea on you. I'd like to know. I'd like to state we disagree. I am saying there is a deep Indian architecture of civilization which is very common to all parts of India and in fact parts of Southeast Asia. And even my opponents will agree with that. They will not disagree with it. They will just say it is abusive and oppressive, and I will say it is sacred. The character and benefit of it we disagree on. But the fact that there is a common architecture, they don't disagree with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the comment. I just have one observation to make, however. That is also my second question as well. By relegating or by bringing Sanskrit to a sacred character, what are your expectations? A, is it to keep it a living language? Or B, is it to bring into practice all the Shastras and Smritis that have existed? Because then a very valid concern comes in the 21st century where we have recognized human rights like right to equality for everyone, irrespective of caste, sex. So in that case, when Manusmriti comes in, there are people who are forbidden to go to temples, and women's rights are, disadvantaged.
I'm very happy you're here because you belong on the other side. The removal of sacred is a very important agenda for my opponents on the grounds that it violates human rights, and to include instead of the sacred lens to look at our text, looking at it as a human rights nightmare, human rights crisis, human rights exploitation as a lens has been brought in. So this started in the Indira Gandhi era with Irfan Habib and Romila Thapar kind of people, but they were not Sanskrit educated. So what happened is they brought in this human rights as the curse of Hinduism and as a curse of Vedas methodology of studying our civilization. However, it was easy to argue with them by saying you don't know the text, you don't know Sanskrit, you are borrowing Western thought, and they were floored. So what Sheldon Pollock has done, he's the person I'm critiquing here, he's a brilliant Sanskrit guy. So he's a leftist Sanskrit guy. Okay, so he says, I'll fill that gap. So this is Romila Thapar's next generation, 2.0. These people that they're training are like the left wing of the past, except they're Sanskritized. They're Sanskritized left wing. So now they're more dangerous. But the ideology basically is that this sacredness, all you guys in the ashram, what you are all about, is all humbug, hocus pocus. And the texts that have been written that you are fond of are basically filled with human rights violations, because they'll deny this to the Shudras and this to the women and this to this guy, that guy, filled with human rights violations, and they were really spread for political motives and political oppression. So your thesis is actually my 500-page response. I'm not going to give you in 2 minutes, but I have a 500-page response to this allegation that these things are filled with human rights violations. I don't buy that at all.
I think you didn't get it clearly. I said Shastras and Smritis. Now they're two different things. So some of the Smritis are a later part. Okay, so they do contain some things. Like now also in Indian temples, Dalits are not allowed to get inside. You cannot deny that. It happens.
Wait.
No, it's not stopped.
Listen.
I'm not saying all temples.
Okay,
in some temples.
No.
Please.
No,
yes.
listen to me.
Yes.
Listen to me. I want you to read chapter 4, which is that is about this thing. Chapter 4 is basically saying, it is called Sanskrit considered a source of oppression. That is what you're talking about.
I don't think
Sanskrit and its texts. Manusmriti is a text. Shastras are a text.
Yes.
Smritis are a text.
So do we limit to some texts, or do you accept Manusmriti also as an essential part?
But wait a second. Sanskrit and its texts considered a source of oppression. Page 135. It's a 40-page chapter, and it details these arguments from the strongest authorities, my opponents, the strongest opponents, and then my response. So I would request you to read these 40 pages. Why they consider Sanskrit texts, Shastras, Smritis, and all these kind of things to be a source of social abuse. You should understand their argument, and then my response. And then I think we'll be better equipped. I'm coming back every 3 months here, and I'd like you to come back after you've read this. Then we can have a debate, because it's too many things you are saying which are false assumptions. I would have to stop you every few words.
No, I'm not talking about false assumption. There are social realities. One incident happened in Bombay as well.
Okay, I don't want to get into an incident that happened in Bombay,
yes.
because that is not what this book is about.
Okay, I know. So that's what I'm asking you to differentiate whether this book is about entirety of any text written in Sanskrit, or is it from some specific text you want to get a status of sacred. You know, say Vedas are fine if you want to get them the status of sacred, or you want everything to get the status of sacred.
No. It is not either or. It is not either or. I'm doing. You know what a Purv Paksh is? What is Purv Paksh?
Due diligence.
No, it is a study of the other. Okay, so I'm responding to the other. So what they are saying, I'm responding to that. What they are not saying, I'm not responding to that. Okay, they are not saying about everything or not everything is sacred or every text or this or that. They have a certain position on the sacredness issue. I'm responding just to that.
Okay.
So to question me, you must know what is their position, why I am critiquing it, and what is my Uttar Paksh. Then you can participate in the debate.
Okay, and last observation that I have to make. I think you are aware of the International Covenant of Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, 1966, which recognizes right to preserve language and culture. So I do understand that we all have a right to preserve Sanskrit and we all have to play a role in it. So don't you think because Article 2 of the Covenant recognizes state obligation?
Yeah, my case has nothing to do with any international law, any treaty, any of these things. It has nothing to do with that. Let's say none of those even existed. I, as a person who is an insider to a tradition, have a right to voice and give a response to those who are outsiders who are oppressing it. Okay. Yeah. And my plea to you is, as a young, creative, bright mind that you are, don't become an automaton, mechanical. This law says, Article 2 says this, as if you're a prisoner of Article 2. To heck with Article 2. We can argue from reasonableness. Whether it's in law or not, we can argue from reasonableness. We can change the laws if we think so. So even if there were no law to protect languages, the point is, and all these laws got biases. All these, you know, the human rights, the law on genocide, the law on genocide, which was drafted by the United Nations. The first draft had a clause which also included cultural genocide. Demolishing a culture would be an act of genocide and criminal. It was removed by the Western countries, and that is not part of the human rights law of genocide, because conversion would be considered an act of genocide under that. So these laws are okay.
Forceful conversion is still considered that.
If you want, no, I'm saying if you want to talk law and all, we can have a whole session on that. But the reason I said this is, you're taking some sacrosanct law of the 1980s as if that's the ultimate thing. I don't care about those.
No, I was just understanding your perspective on whether you think the state should also play its role in advancing Sanskrit. That was where I was coming. I think you just misread me somewhere in the middle and went haywire.
No. What I'm saying is.
So how do you keep the language alive?
No, you could state your question just by saying, should the state have a role? Period. That's your question. Why do you want to bring some law? No law required. Your question is a good question. Should the state play a role in protection of Sanskrit? Now let me tell you, in France, which is one of the most liberal countries, when they give a media license, there is a minimum French content required in order to have a media license in France. And in China, the protection of Mandarin is a national thing. English is a second language, not the mother tongue. Even now they want everybody to be English speaking as a second language.
So is the case in Russia and Germany.
So Russia, Germany, Japan. So we are not the only ones that would like to do that. So is it in Iran. Persian language is the mother tongue. So is it in Arabia. We have this English obsession because we are still colonized. We still wanting to become white. Okay. So one of my unpublished books is How the Indians Become White. Okay. There's a book I read which inspired me, How the Irish Became White. And then there's a may I complete? And then a book called How the Jews Became White Folks. So I started reading. White is not color of skin; it is privilege. It is certain lifestyle. So the Irish were not considered white for membership in these labor unions. because the labor unions were all white labor unions to keep the blacks out. And the Irish, because they were ruled by England, Ireland was a colony of the British. So when these Irish guys would come to America, the Englishmen would not want him in the union, because in the labor union, because he's from a colony. So the Irish were excluded from labor unions, hence they were not classified as white people for legal purposes. And there was a big riot and war and people killed in Philadelphia. All this happened in the 1800s, and then a settlement was reached that from now on we will classify Irish as white people. So this is how the Irish became white. They were not considered white. I give this book to a lot of my Irish friends, and first they get very angry because they think that they are, you know, big shots in the US now. I tell them you were not whites until 150 years ago. And then there's a book called How the Jews Became White, folks. Until the early 1900s, Karen Brotkin wrote the book, the anthropologist at UCLA. Until the early 1900s, Jews were classified as people of color for immigration purposes. So now, how they are becoming white, they are becoming white like that. Now Hispanics are fighting as to whether we want to be white or not white, because they have two kinds of people. And it has to do with language. The preservation of Spanish and the lobby that it should be a second language on par with English is for the Hispanic identity. That is what it is. And those who don't want to be classified as a separate ethnicity are becoming white, and you just see them, they're just like white people. It's not about skin color. So Indians becoming white is more complex than all of these. Because not only Indians become white, not only the skin color kind of business, but there is an intellectual whiteness. Indians want to become like the liberal white. They're reading a certain kind of very lofty kind of writer that nobody has heard about, and because he can pronounce some very complicated word, you know, he's become a little more white than the other person. And his single malt is 18 years, and your single malt is only 15 years, and so he's a little bit more white, and he knows some aesthetics. It's all about white aesthetics in language, and you see it in the Jaipur Literary Festival. That is how you're becoming white. Okay. So what I'm trying to tell you is that preservation of native culture, spiritual traditions, languages, dance, drama, ethnicity, all of this way of life is our right. It is not something some treaty has to give us, and we have to argue based on Article 2 of that treaty whether we're allowed to do this. I don't buy that. I have a right to assert my identity as my right, and all I'm doing is arguing. They can reject it. I'm not imposing on anybody. All I'm doing here, I'm not reducing any state machinery. I'm saying I want to create a group, a home team of intellectual scholars who are traditional intellectual scholars who can go to international forums and debate and give answers, talk right back to the outsiders. That's all I'm trying to do. And so I don't want to be dragged into anything more than that.
Okay, I get your point.
I understand.
And also, yes, I do appreciate that we have to obviously preserve our language, our culture. That's how I started also my note. Also, in support of what you said, the white, how we all are turning white. One thing which I've noticed now is that if anyone applies for a job application, if you have any degree from abroad, be it a diploma also, you get an edge even if you're from the best college in India.
Yes.
Somewhere that happens. And also there is a kind of post-colonialism which is happening now, wherein these big brands like say Marks and Spencer, Benetton, they come and open their factory outlets here with minimum rights. Like they do not give those same wages and living conditions to the workers, in the instance wherein buildings have collapsed in Bangladesh. Like they exploit our workers to sell those products back to us at an exorbitant rate. So something which happened during the
you are 1600s. Bright. What is your name?
Shivika.
Shivika, I'm very happy that you're here, and you're certainly a very bright person in human rights kind of a law, I can tell, and that's an important thing. I think what my suggestion to you is read this, and maybe it'll give you some references to an Indian idea of human rights. An Indian idea. See, the idea of human rights is a Western idea. It is not an Indian idea.
Now we're bringing the Oriental or the Indian idea. That's
because we have nature has rights. You know, the environmentalist movement is not giving nature its rights. It's just saying it is a raw material, and the reason I want to preserve is I may run out of raw material.
I'll tell you a very interesting incident. There's a tree in the US which has right to land. It was a case fought by environmental lawyers, and there is a 5-mile patch, not a 5-mile, 5-meter patch that the tree has around it. It owns it now because it was being cut down. So the environmental lawyers won that case. So something in that context we are trying to work here as well. I really appreciate it.
It is not a US innovation.
Yes.
The right of a tree is not a US innovation.
It is not.
Nature's right is built into our structure.
Very true.
Nature is sacred, has rights.
Yes.
Okay, over there, God made the world as property for man. You know that. Even woman was property for man for quite a long time. Only recently it got changed. And it was not clear that whether blacks have a soul. It was a huge argument in the church, do they have soul or not? Animals don't. And there was even a debate on whether women have a soul in the church. There was a debate hundreds of years ago. We never had these problems. Even little chinti has Atma. Okay? And this nature is sacred. It is not because nature is my property, I must protect it, and because my property will lose value. It's not that. Whereas environmental movement is don't spoil the water because the fishing industry will be hurt. Okay, and don't deplete the energy because the energy price will go up. It is an economic self-interest of human beings for which nature has to be preserved. We have a different view. We say that nature has its own rights. It is nature's rights, it's not our right to own nature. Different view.
I'll just make a last comment and because we can have a lengthy discussion
Yes,
of this.
we should have one.
Yes. Supporting your natural rights theory, wherein we derive rights from nature and everything derives rights from nature, from the state of being. When the invaders came, the Spanish and the English invaders came, they were in a fix to deal with people like us because the Bible did not mention our lands. So they were in a fix that time because everything was doctrinated in Bible. And so they had to look back to natural thinkers like Grotius, Hugo, to understand how to deal with people, and to deal with indigenous people, though they still made a mess out of it. But yes, we have to ultimately look at nature. That's what I feel. And so I have a submission to make that in Sanskrit also, in Shastras wherein the nature is not being respected, I feel that portion need not be sacred.
No. We have every right to amend, modify, debate, reinterpret
that
our
was my
texts.
only concern throughout the whole discussion.
No, sacred doesn't mean that we don't reinterpret, that we don't challenge. We have had many revolutions. Sacred is not history. You have to read a book of mine called Being Different, where I describe the spirit. The dharma is not religion. And what you are arguing, your view of sacred is as per religion. And religion is historically determined, fixed. The God stopped sending prophets, and he has got a do not disturb sign. He is not accessible. And so what was written historically is all we know. In our case, new spiritual masters keep coming, and you are Satchitanand. You have the same potential as the highest being in the cosmos. You can achieve that. Every human being has that. So we are not history-centric. Therefore, the sacredness is not sort of fixed and that cannot be challenged and questioned and superseded. We have to do that. So sacredness is not that this thing is sort of that there is a blasphemy law. It's nothing like that. Okay? So I'm glad that you are a fiery person and you'll be a good leader, including in the sacred dimension. Just do not think of religion. Think of the dharma as a separate.
I wanted to clarify what was your interpretation. Now I got it now at the end. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. See, I like young people to come and challenge. It's a lot of fun. But one point you mentioned, when the Spaniards and the Portuguese, these guys discovered the native lands, I'll tell you, they all wanted to own the land. So they wanted to claim, but they have an obsession to look like they're moral. They want to kill, but there have to be a moral reason. So they had to figure out what to do with these Native Americans, natives. So it was decided, therefore a huge debate started on do they have souls or not, do they count. And then the church issued an edict called the Doctrine of Christian Discovery, which means discovery happens when a Christian discovers it. This is why America was discovered in 1492 by Columbus, as though the natives who lived there for 20,000 years never discovered it. This is amazing. You see, this is called, it is just search, Doctrine of Christian Discovery. You will see that there was these doctrine issued by the Pope. And these doctrines were called bull. They're like fatwas. And I don't know why bull, maybe it was bullshit or something. maybe they call that. But this is called a papal bull, which means Pope has issued this bull, and it has authority, final authority, saying that when somebody who's a Christian discovers a land and declares that he's discovered it in the name of Jesus Christ and that, it becomes the property of the particular empire, because whether it's Spanish, Portugal, they ultimately report it to the Vatican. So this is the history of how they treated the natives.
Hi, I'm Abhishek.
In this book, chapter 2 gives you that. What is different about American history from European history? The American approach to India is different than the European approach to India, because America has absorbed and assimilated the genocide of Native Americans and the slavery of blacks, and that hasn't gone out of the American psyche. And so Europeans have the colonization of other people in foreign lands, and America is genocide and slavery in their own land as foreign occupants who took over on that basis. So it's different historical experience in the basement of the people. Please.
Yeah. Hi, Jai Gurudev. I'm Abhishek, and my question is regarding the Western endonomists that you talk about. I mean, people who Western trained, and you talk that they write about the Indian literature, they explain the Vedas. So recently reading a book by a gentleman called Stephen Knapp, and he's written a book called The Secret Teachings of the Veda. And for an amateur reader like me, I found it quite interesting and enlightening. So are you trying to tell us that you should, everything that comes from a Western author...
No, see, I know Stephen Knapp very well. I do not want you to think that the West-East is an ethnic issue. Western Indology is a certain frame of mind. That's why I call them Charvaks. They're Charvaks 2.0. So Indians there are more Western Indologists who are Indian. It's that ideology. It's a certain ideology. It's like French fries don't come from France. The French hate it because it's a useless deep fried thing. It's named after them. They don't think it comes from France. So Western Indology is the name for a certain view, certain methodology for studying India. And it is not just in the West it's happening in India. In most of the Indology being done in Indian universities is Western Indology. It is not Swadeshi Indology. It is Videshi Indology being done by Indians. So it is not the ethnicity of the writer. A lot of Westerners could be into our sense of sacredness.
So then how do you define the Western Indologist? I mean, what
so I describe the premises. So the premise of is it sacred, is it not, is a premise. Like that I give a whole list of what are the assumptions through which the lens, the drishti with which you are looking at our texts. That is the definition of insider versus outsider. When I say insider, outsider, it is not exactly Indian and Western. Anybody can be an insider to the Vedic tradition, and anybody can be an outsider. Yeah? But I'm glad you made me clarify that.
Yeah, Rajivji, it's a pleasure and a privilege to meet you. I have read all your works, and it's...
so now you must read this.
Yeah, I bought it already.
You must read it and then you write a review, write some articles. I want people to start writing about it.
I've already spread the word across social media.
Good.
And my question is basically about, why not take the battle to the other camp,
We are. This is what we're doing.
No, but this is in reference to a particular, incident, or we are getting defense.
No, this is the incident. No, it is not. I'm not describing any incident. The incident is a wake-up call, and the whole book is nothing to do with that incident. Mm-hmm. The rest of the book is a deconstruction of Western Indology, the broadest ever done.
Yeah. For example, when you mentioned aesthetization of power, and how the Marxists have defined it with reference to the Third Reich, they themselves are doing it,
Of course.
Yeah.
I give a section here where I say, let me evaluate these Indologists by their own theory. And I say that they are aestheticizing their power by using very high-flown mumbo-jumbo language, English language that we don't understand, and having all these very big pompous literary festivals funded by the billionaire type people.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the conspiracy of Brahmin and the king is now happening as the conspiracy of Western Indologists with the Murti funding them.
Exactly.
So I'm reversing all this back on them.
Okay.
In this book.
So what I wanted to ask you was that, is there any book in your agenda which would actually throw a light on Marxism, for example, as a subject per se.
Not Marxism itself, because I think more important, more dangerous and more important for us to study and do Purv Paksh is postmodernism. Postmodernism is an offshoot, and it's become more catchy and trendy. You go to English honors classes, they're all studying postmodernism, very fashionable. It's the way the young become white. Intellectually white. There are many paths to whiteness. One is skin color cream, and many paths. One other is, you have a certain style of drinking whiskey, and that you become this white saab, And another is that you are intellectual as per Jaipur Literary Festival idea, and now you can talk in a certain way.
I understand.
So these are different doorways to whiteness for Indian people.
So can we expect some books on postmodernism?
Yeah. Postmodernism, I've written a little bit in Being Different, but I have a lot more to say on that.
Okay, thank you so much.
And postmodernism is an example of a lot of appropriation from Vedanta and Buddhism by some of the some of the pioneers in postmodernism. You can see in the early years they studied Indian philosophy, and then they turned it around into something different, removed this sacredness. That's a consequence of what the problem I'm talking about.
Thank you so much.
Rajivji, my question is, there's a lot of convergence happening in India right now, in the states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, my native home village. So now there are people who acknowledge that their forefathers were converted into Christianity, but still they say because of the oppression from the ruling class or the Brahminical or the other caste for that matter, the Dalits, they got converted. And how to rehabilitate them and bring them to the main society, because they are neither there nor here.
But see, art of living has no caste discrimination, right? Ramakrishna Mission doesn't. Chinmaya Mission doesn't. I name you the top 20 or 50 or whatever modern dharmic organizations that are popularizing, that are spreading. None of them have caste discrimination. So I think that is also an overused excuse. Maybe it is in certain pockets and maybe it is in certain strata, and that is where we have to go and fix that problem. But the conversion is going on at all strata. The conversion is going on in very elite strata where there is no discrimination. Those guys are very rich people who are converting. A lot of people I know that. They are converting. So it is only one segment of conversion is poor people based on oppression that we should acknowledge and we should correct. But there's many other kinds of conversion also going on.
And again, in this the conversion whole process.
And conversion is not only to Christianity. There is a very soft conversion to Islam called Sufism. It's a fashionable thing to go and say, Sufi, and put some pan in your mouth and Sufis. Exoticize this aestheticization of the Sufi. It's a very popular thing in Delhi.
And how to
Bollywood movies doing a lot of soft Islamization of
how to check it and stop it.
No, you can't use state machinery. You got to wake up and have your scholars. Scholars respond. You got to have your own gurus become wiser and smarter, and they should stop saying things like all religions are the same. They have to become less politically correct and teach people the reality, become more audacious. So it has to be. It is a battlefield of ideas. Conversion is a conversion of mind. It is not physically anybody doing it. Conversion means your mind has switched from what it was to something else. Somebody has given you a different narrative and changed your mind. So if you want to fight the battle of conversion, it's a battle of ideas. It's a battle of arguments. So you got to have people who are better at that. In any game, if you're losing, you just have to have better players. We have not invested enough in really seriously understanding doing Purv Paksh on the conversion process and coming up with good Uttar Paksh. We have not done a good enough job, in my opinion.
Because the Gar Vapsi was a failure in India. It involved a lot of criticism.
Yeah. Please.
Namaste Rajivji. I have heard a lot of lectures from you. I used to live in New Jersey 4 years ago. I have heard your lectures in Ashram Gurukulam with Subhash Kak and Conrad Elst and Dr. M.G. Prasad and all those things. So it's always a pleasure to hear you again and again. One comment or maybe question, I don't know whether you address this in this book. Sometimes I see the insiders become overzealous and claimed that everything was there in Vedas.
Yeah, and that's counterproductive. It
That's
makes
very
us, it is silly. I reject all these kind of claims. In my books, I make fun of those guys. I want nothing to do with that. Because what happens is, the genuine claims which we can establish with empirical evidence, then those also get dismissed as quackery. So there is a lot of quack Hindu activists and intellectuals, pseudo-intellectuals. We have a problem. And
it's a huge problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. You, the consumer, should hold people accountable for what they are saying, and not just applaud because the guy comes and says, oh, we are the greatest and we were there 50 million years ago. I mean, the more chauvinistic and exaggerated, the better the person gets applauded. That's wrong. You have to hold them to a rigor, intellectual rigor, and make sure that this can be proven and established.
And in fact, they are damaging the
absolutely, absolutely. There's a lot of bad scholars who just and not enough tapasya done.
Yeah.
Not enough tapasya done to produce serious work. Quick, with a lot of exaggeration, sensation to get out there and become successful. It's very dangerous for us. I'm glad you mentioned it. Thank you. So what is the time? And then I'll sit there and sign. Outside, I will sit, and whoever gets one, I will sign as long as it takes. Okay, so last question, and then we stop. I'll sign, and then we'll go and have dinner. And we'll go to the dining hall, and we all sit together and keep chatting if you guys want. I mean, I'm available all night if you want.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. Sir, I'm connected with ideologically, basically. 2-3 things I want to ask you, share with me. Now, creating ideological people for our own support. Purvapaksh.
Yeah.
Already our organization is doing it. The Hindu organization is past 20-25 is building up a team of intellectuals who can fight for our own rightness systematically.
Who's the organization?
It's called Prajna Pravaha from the RSS.
Okay.
Yeah, but it has not yet come up to that level.
Yeah, but they are, I don't want to talk about particular organizations.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to mention this.
Many of them read my stuff also, and I'm happy they did that. But what you need is more rigor and more tapasya. Longer, it takes something that takes 5 years, 10 years of research to get it out in 2 months is not a good idea.
No, exactly. The same thing they wanted to build is, they want people from the society come out, work for that, you become authentic, and as Sir is telling us, be strong in that, then we can support you. We don't have a right person ideologically to promote this.
Give me a question, because they also want to stop. Tell me your question, then I'll answer it.
Yeah. Second thing is come to today's political world, today's Indian system as of date. Authenticization is what you're talking about, is happening like what the government is doing, the India government is doing now, of forcing things.
Are you asking me a question?
Yes, sir.
Please ask me a question.
Yeah, question is like culturally with authenticization, we spoke about many things.
Cultural what?
Aestheticization. Is it happening now?
Aestheticization of power.
Now it is happening? Do you feel that?
Well, aestheticization of power, we can't overuse the term loosely. It's a very technical term.
Okay.
It's a very technical term on how to stay in power with the use of aesthetics.
Okay.
So to make somebody, to make a case that somebody is doing that, you really have to argue and show a lot of requirements to prove that. It's not just a casual thing you can use.
Is it a beginning? Do you feel it's a beginning now?
Beginning of what?
Culturally, or the ideas what you want to be put in, percolated down the line to make the country like this, what we want?
I think it's too early, and
too early to judge also?
Yeah, too early.
Okay. So third thing is, how is that Art of Living faculty or Art team is with his thoughts, and Guruji and all, you spent time with him. What was your, just a few lines with Guruji and this idea?
No, I've known CCG for 20 years.
Okay.
And have many private meetings.
Okay.
So he just took me to have a private meeting on some private matters that I don't want to talk about.
No,
we talk about private matters all the time.
Okay.
And I really respect him as a phenomenal person, as somebody who's operating on at many levels of the being.
Yes.
Many levels of the being, from Paramarthika to Vyavaharika, and he's done an amazing job, and I'm so happy to watch this thrive.
Thank you.